Morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Good morning, Rabbi.
We are learning Mishnah Shabbos, Perek Zayin, chapter 7. We're still in Mishnah Beis, going through the 39 Avos Malachas, the 39 primary forms of forbidden activity on Shabbos. We are now up to Hakosher, which means someone who ties a knot. Okay. Now, as we've been going through the notes here in the art scroll, the first thing being mentioned that's brought down from the Bartenura is where was this found in the construction of the Mishkan, right? All of the 39 primary forms of work on forbidden activity on Shabbos were found in the construction of the Mishkan. So where was tying a knot found there? The answer is fishing nets were used to trap the chilazin, a small aquatic creature whose secretion is techelis, special blue dye used for the curtains and one of the coverings of the Mishkan. These nets were made of ropes tied together with knots. Okay, that's how the nets were made. You take the ropes and you knotted all the ropes together and you made a net out of it. So that's where you find kosher making a knot in the construction of the Mishkan. The next malach is matir, untying a knot. Where do you find that? In the Mishkan. So the Bartenura explains, sometimes it was necessary to untie ropes from one net so that they could be added to another net. You know, another net needed another string, and whatever for reason this one didn't, they would untie from one and then put it in the other. So that's where we find tying and untying in the Mishkan. We're not going into any details here right now, what kind of knot we're talking about. We're just talking about there is a malacha called tying a knot and untying. That's hakosher v'hamater, tying a knot, untying a knot. Next, literally translated as sewing two stitches. Now, we would translate two stitches as two stitches, but that's not how in Mishnaic terms. That's not what it means. A minimum of two passes of the needle, one in and out, are required for one to be liable for sewing. Mm-hmm. That's what we call really one stitch. We would call that one stitch,
process, yeah,
right?
Yeah.
But what the Mishnah calls tefira, a sewing. What we don't have a word for it, but like a stitch in the halachic term means going in is one and coming out is the other. That's what you have to do for this malacha to be done. You don't need 1, 2, 1, 2, which would be two stitches. All you need is really what we call one stitch, one in, one out. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Each puncture is considered a stitch, basically. Yeah.
But you're not chayav for that,
right?
Now. The Bartenura adds one who sews exactly two stitches, meaning that's one in and out, is not liable unless he ties the ends together, because otherwise they will not hold.
It'll come right out.
Right. In that case, then he is liable for two malachot. So wait a second. So therefore, he's trying to say for the malacha deraisa, in this case of one stitch to be possible, you have to do the stitch and then tie them together, which really comes out that you're doing two malachas at one time. You're stitching and you're tying. Okay, next. Ha-kareya almanas litvar shtei tfiris. One who tears in order to sew two stitches. Now here they're going to explain. What does this mean, tearing in order to sew two stitches? Which means midarais, according to Torah law, just tearing is not a malacha. It's not a forbidden activity. It's got to be tearing in order to sew two stitches. When a small hole was found in the curtains of the Mishkan, they would make the hole bigger by tearing the fabric next to it. A tailor could then repair the hole neatly without making creases in the cloth. If you leave the circle there, you try sewing it together, it's going to be creases. So you tear it further so that you basically make it, instead of being round, it becomes longer. And then when you stitch it together, it won't have those creases. That's how it manifests this malach of tearing for the purpose of tying two stitches. Okay. Now, they point out here that the next set of malachas are the malachas that were involved in creating one of the coverings of the Mishkan, which was made from the hides of an animal called a tachash, which Rashi says is an animal that existed only at that time. Mm-hmm. And the following malachas were performed in the preparation of these hides. So let's start. Hatzad tzvi, one who traps a deer. Catching an animal directly or trapping it in an enclosed area where it can easily be caught later is the malacha of tzad is trapping. Why did it say a deer? That was just the most common case of trapping an animal in those days, and therefore it mentioned that. But it doesn't have to be a deer. It could be other animals. And again, without going into all the halachas, it would have to, for midaraisa to be trapping, there are a number of conditions that have to be met. Okay, so we have a tzadtzvi, one who traps, slaughtering. Now here, this is explained as any manner of taking the life of an animal is included in the category of slaughtering. Doesn't just mean shchita, what we call shchita, halachic slaughtering. Any kind of slaughtering the life of an animal is included in this malacha. Next, v'hamafshita is skinning. After slaughtering the deer, its hide is removed to be made into leather or parchment. That's the malacha of skinning, of mafshit. Hamolchai v'hamabed es oirei, which translated hamolcha means salting, v'hamabed es oirei means tanning. For hide to be usable as a leather or parchment, it must be dried and then softened. This is the process of tanning. In those times, tanning involved salting the hide and then soaking in various substances. Okay, so that's all right. So that's salting and tanning. Now, here's a question from the Gemara, and that is the Gemara finds difficulty with the separate listing of salting and tanning, because salting is just the beginning of the tanning process.
One process.
It concludes that both are avos of one malacha, even though they are listed here as separate malachas. They really are meant to be one malacha. And the Gemara therefore removes one of them from the Mishnah and replaces it with another. The Mishnah didn't do that, but the Gemara corrects or changes the Mishnah to take out one of them, meaning you get, what you want to call it, malcha, you want to call it salting, call it salting. You want to call it tanning, call it tanning. It's the same thing. So what now is what's going to replace one of them, right? We're supposed to have 39.
Yeah.
If we're combining them as one, what's going to replace? So the Gemara says what's brought down, what's the replacement is a malacha called misartate, scoring. Before cutting leather, one scores lines in it where the cuts will be made so that the cuts will be smooth and straight. That is a separate malacha when it comes to the permitted activities on Shabbos. Next, veha meichkai. Meichkai means to smooth. That is scraping the hair off the hide to produce smooth parchment or leather. That's the malach of meichik, smoothing. V'machatchai, cutting. This refers to trimming and cutting the hide into a specific size for such items as straps or shoes. Okay, so that's important to know. Machatchai, cutting, isn't just cutting. It means cutting or trimming into a specific size because that's the size you need for what you want to do with it. Okay. Let's see. Okay, let's go a little bit further. One who writes two letters, and the next malacha is one who erases for the purpose of writing two letters. Okay, so writing at least two letters is the av malacha of writing. Okay, the av malacha, one second, it has to be two letters. They wrote a letter on each beam of the Mishkan's wall so that when they reassembled the Mishkan, they could pair up every two beams that were meant to be next to each other. That's why it has to be two.
Yeah.
Now, erasing. That's the next malacha, erasing, meichik. If they made a mistake in writing the letters on a beam in the Mishkan, they would erase them to make room for the correct letters. How they made that mistake exactly, I'm not sure. But if they made a mistake in writing the letters on a beam in the Mishkan, they would erase them to make room for the correct letters. Whatever, I guess when they were pairing it up, they wrote a letter and they realized, oh, this is not the right thing. So they erased it. The Av is erasing two letters or even one large letter in order to write two letters in their place. Meaning, again, the Mishnah says you're erasing in order to write two letters. That was what we found in the Mishkan. But to erase in order to write two letters, you don't have to erase two letters. You just have to erase a letter that used up the space for two letters. And therefore, either erasing two letters or erasing a large letter that makes room for two letters is the malacha of erasing. Have a wonderful day.
Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. No.